What is up, guys? Today I'm going to give you some of my potential breakout candidates for the 2024 NFL season. Some of these players haven't had a great start to their career and are looking to bounce back. Some of them haven't gotten onto the field because of injuries, and there are others who haven't had an opportunity at a significant amount of playing time because of just good players that are ahead of them on their team on the depth chart. Either way, regardless of what situation they're coming from, I think all these players are going to have a stellar 2024 season. First up is a very polarizing guy. I think a lot of people are writing him off. And while I understand that, I still think that Bryce Young, the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, who is the number one pick in the 2023 NFL draft, is still going to be a good quarterback. I didn't think that last year was very indicative of how his career is going to play out, or even of him as a player in general. He was throwing to an injured DJ Chark and an old Adam Thielen. Jonathan Mingo, the rookie, wasn't very good. Terrence Marshall has not been good at all, and his running backs, Miles Sanders, was really bad. And his tight end one was like Tommy Tremble, who is a tight end three on a lot of teams. And I don't think it was really fair to evaluate this year and be like, oh yeah, that's what he's going to be because his offensive line was terrible too. To add on to that, I just think Bryce Young is going to have a good season. And while I don't necessarily believe in the Carolina Panthers as a team, they have one of the worst rosters in the NFL. They did improve the offensive line and the pass catchers, and they drafted Jonathan Brooks, a running back out of Texas, in the second round. And I think that is a good move to help Bryce Young because I still think he's good. And I think after this year, people won't question whether he is the franchise quarterback. And like I said, the Panthers are a whole nother conversation. I don't understand what they're doing. Their team doesn't make a lot of sense. And regardless of that, I just still think that Bryce Young is really good, and I believe in him, and I think he will have a great year, and a lot of people will be surprised. On to another player who has had a less than ideal start to his NFL career. It is Jameson Williams, the wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. Williams was the 12th overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. The Lions traded up from the back half of the first round to go up and get him. And if you remember, he tore his ACL in the college football national championship game in 2021 against Georgia. So the first year was a redshirt year. He had one catch. It was a 40-yard touchdown or something like that. It was a long touchdown. I remember it was against the Vikings. And then the gambling suspension hit, and he had to sit out for a lot of the offseason. And yeah, he wasn't a huge contributor on the Lions team, even though they were successful. And I think that is set to change. When he came in halfway through the year from that suspension, he wasn't really integrated into the offense. Josh Reynolds, the other wide receiver, was very good for the Lions, and there just wasn't a huge role for Williams. And he struggled too. He had a ton of drops in the beginning of the year, but he slowly got better at the end of the year, and he had two touchdowns in the NFC Championship game against the Niners. And I just think he's going to have a good year. If you've heard stuff that Dan Campbell has been saying, he said that Williams is the most improved player on the team. He's a man on a mission. And I believe that because Campbell does not say that stuff just to say it. He's not going to sugarcoat it to hype up his guys. Last year, he was saying that, yeah, Williams, he just hasn't have great hands right now and all this stuff. So now, I don't know, there's the wide receiver two spot is open. You still have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, but those are more possession guys. And I think Williams can bring another facet to this offense. And I'm excited to see what Ben Johnson does with him with a full offseason in the facility. Next up is maybe the most memed player in the NFL, and that is Quentin Johnston, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. This guy was a first round pick in 2023. He was kind of seen as a replacement for Mike Williams, but Mike Williams got hurt early in the year and Johnson had to play, and he was really bad. There's no other way to put it. He had really bad hands. He was dropping balls. I remember he dropped a potentially game-winning catch against the Packers in the middle of the season, and it just wasn't good at all. It didn't look promising, and it didn't get better towards the end of the season either, which is a little discouraging, but I still believe in him. He's a really unique player. He's a big physical guy, and when you look at him, you might think he's a X receiver, like a 50-50 ball, but he's really not that. He's an after the catch guy who can get open down the field. And I just think that's so unique. And that's not the reason why I think he's going to succeed. But I just believe that last year was an outlier. The Chargers were really bad. They were dumpster fire as a whole. Herbert got hurt towards the end of the season, and he was getting thrown to by Easton Stick, and they were losing by 60 points to the Raiders and all this stuff. And I just think he's going to have a bounce back year. If you look at this Chargers depth chart, there's not that much wide receiver competition. Lad McConkey, they drafted in the second round, and he is a completely different type of receiver. He's probably a slot guy who's going to be a possession receiver. And Josh Palmer, who is good, but he's probably going to be no more than like a 700 yards a year guy, role player. And I think there is a chance for Johnson to flourish in this offense. Herbert can't throw to Keenan Allen or Mike Williams anymore, the two guys that he had thrown to his whole career. And I think Johnson can assume that role that Mike Williams had. And I think Herbert really likes throwing down the field, especially to Mike Williams. So I'm looking forward to what he can be in this offense and excited to see how Jim Harbaugh uses him because Jim Harbaugh knows him well. Johnston had like a 90-yard catch against him in the college football playoff in 2021, or 2022. And I feel like I'm one of the few believers in Quentin Johnston, but I think he could have a solid 800-yard season this year, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. Next up is the Kansas City Chiefs cornerback Joshua Williams. He was a fourth round pick in the 2022 draft out of Fayetteville State. He was a largely developmental prospect. Fayetteville State, I believe, is an FCS school, so he didn't have great competition, but he could sit in a talented cornerback room and learn, and I think this is the year that he can flourish. They traded away L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason to the Titans, and Steve Spagnuolo has a history of turning these late-round cornerback prospects, small school prospects, into big-time contributors. L'Jarius Sneed was an all-pro. He was a day 3 pick in 2020, and Charvarius Ward before him was UDFA, and he ended up becoming a great corner. Now he's with the Niners. And I think that Williams could be on that trajectory, although I don't know if he's going to become a Pro Bowl player, but he could become a solid corner. And it's just unfair what the Chiefs do. I mean, they have Patrick Mahomes, and then they just go through on defense and draft these late round guys who become contributors. It's almost impossible to beat them, as it's evident in these last few years if they went back-to-back Super Bowls. But Williams had a good 2023. He split the outside role with Jalen Watson opposite of L'Jarius Sneed. And he was decent. He didn't have a lot of playing time, and I think this is the year that he takes a significant jump and becomes a solid starter for Kansas City. Next up is one of my favorite draft prospects I have ever watched, and that is David Ojabo, the edge rusher for the Baltimore Ravens. He was a second-round pick in the 2022 NFL draft. Just a crazy pre-draft college, just NFL career, really. He was from Nigeria. I believe he was born in Nigeria, moved to Scotland, then played college football at Michigan, and broke out of nowhere and was super good opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And then in the pre-draft testing, he tore up his knee. I can't remember if it was an ACL or an Achilles, but tore something that basically put him out for the 2023 season or 2022 season. He dropped to the second round because of that, and then had injuries in the 2023 season and barely played. He's only played 5 career games, I believe, but he's had 2 sacks, which is decent production. And the reports I've read have been that he should be healthy for the 2024 training camp upcoming in a couple months. And he was really good. He was a really complete prospect in my mind, and he still had a high ceiling, which is what I like to see from a guy who has a high ceiling and a high floor, and that was Ojabo for me. And the Ravens, they just cycle through these mid edge rushers who are somehow really good. For them, Kyle Van Noy, they still have, who has to fall off at some time. They lost Javion Clowney in the offseason, and they still have Odafe Oweh, who's he's a rookie first rounder guy who should still be good. But Ojabo, I think, has a chance to break out as a second edge rusher and replace Clowney's production opposite of Oweh. And I'm excited to see when he gets a full training camp to improve, and the Ravens defense is going to help him out. It's going to be easier for him to do it on the Ravens and other teams because their defense is just so darn good all the time. And I think that we can expect a decent season from Ojabo, maybe a not 7, 8, 9 sacks, something like that would be fantastic production. Next up is a guy who I think could be a true lockdown CB1 in the future, and that is Deonte Banks of the New York Giants. He was a first-round selection in the 2023 NFL draft, and he had a decent rookie year. There were some struggles, I'm not going to lie, but it was very hard for him to succeed because that cornerback room was not very talented at all for the Giants. He was the de facto CB1 as soon as he stepped into the building, basically. And Wink Martindale was their defensive coordinator, who was very blitz heavy. So often he was left with no safety help as it was cover zero, and he was left on islands with teams' number one receivers. And like I said, there were struggles at times, but I think he can take a leap to be a good corner in the NFL this year. They fired Wink Martindale or parted ways, or however is worded. He's gone, and this new guy, Shane Bowen from the Titans, I think is going to help him and give him more safety help. And I think that is going to benefit Deonte Banks. The Giants traded for Brian Burns, which will help the pass rush, which will then lead to the quarterback to throw shorter, which will help Banks too. So I think Banks is primed to be a breakout player this year. And I'm not saying he's going to be a bona fide Pro Bowler next year or anything, but I think he has the chance to become a really, really good corner in the future, and that starts with an improvement next season, which I think we'll see. To wrap it up, we have Trenton Simpson, the linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. He was a third round pick in the 2023 draft out of Clemson. He was kind of a weird prospect. He's a hybrid linebacker safety type. A lot of people thought he should move to like an Isaiah Simmons role, like a safety kind of, I don't know. He was a weird player. It's hard to put a position on him. But I think the Ravens were a great spot for him, and that's honestly why he fell, is because of that positional questions. But the Ravens were a great spot for him. He didn't have to play in year one. They have Roquan Smith, who's a top three linebacker in the NFL, and Patrick Queen, who had a really good 2023. And Queen left for the Steelers, and now I think Simpson can be a good linebacker too. Like I said, he has limitations just because he's not the biggest guy. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not a big linebacker, but you're playing with Roquan Smith, and I think that will help him tremendously. I think it helped Patrick Queen tremendously. I don't have faith that Patrick Queen is going to be great in Pittsburgh, but Simpson, I think, will have a good contributor for the Ravens, and you see this all the time. I talked about it earlier in the video with the Chiefs, how they just cycle through all these late round corners and they end up becoming really good. The Ravens are the same way with their defense, to be honest. And I think Simpson is next up to be a very good contributor for the Ravens in the 2024 season. All right, those are some candidates that I think could break out in the 2024 NFL season. Let me know down below if you have any players that you think can break out. I think there's more players too, but I limited to the guys that I had true, real conviction on, that I was confident in. And that should be it. So I'll see you guys later.